Let's start our global update from Zimbabwe, looking at the latest development in that country where the Reserve Bank is set to issue a new currency, a digital currency that is meant to rescue the Zimbabwe economy. Looking at the performance of the Zimbabwe dollar, it's at 36,000 naira to $1. And the attempt is to rescue this monetary chaos in the country. Let's see how this is going to play out. We would like to seek the opinion of an expert, a global affairs analyst who joins us. We are being joined this morning by the ambassador of Caribbean island of Antigua and Barbuda to Nigeria. We have Dr. Williams Wallace, who joins us on election this morning. Glad you have been joining us this morning. All right. While we wait for our guests, it's important to let you know that the Zimbabwe economy, let me bring blessing into this, it's been a chaotic situation. If you look,
yes, it has been.
The monetary policy in the last 6 months and even in the last 3 months. In fact, it's fair now compared to what it used to be. The Zimbabwean dollar exchanges at the rate of 36,000 naira to $1.
36,000 Zimbabwean dollars
to
the US dollar.
So you would think, looking at that of the Nigerian situation, you would think, okay, it's precarious. But if you look at this one, you know that, okay, Nigeria is at the head of the table. Presently, exchange rate is between 1,200 naira to 1,300 naira to a US dollar in Nigeria. Looking at that of the Zimbabwe, it's a cause for concern. And that's why they're thinking that, okay, there's a need for them to re-strategize, which is to launch a new digital currency that will be backed by the gold reserves in that country. As far as gold reserves are concerned, Zimbabwe is blessed, they have it in surplus. So they are looking
Do they really have it in surplus?
Yes, yes. It's
compared to what South Africa has?
No, yes, but it's all about management. Even if whatever you have, if you don't have a cut-out policy or how to manage it or how to maximize it very well, it's going to give a poor result. But this time they feel, okay, they can use what they have to manage the situation and get a better result. Knowing fully well that most Zimbabweans, they don't like keeping money in the bank. They have this culture of keeping money at home. They call it what you call mattress banking.
Yes.
Unlike here where, an average Nigerian understands that there's a need to keep money in the bank, even though some people still keep money at home. But compared to what is happening in Zimbabwe, it's like a custom because they don't have the belief in the banking system, lack of trust, and as a result of the performance of the Zimbabwe dollar. So they are not sure what may happen. In fact, a lot of them prefer to hold their assets in US dollars, which is why US dollar is the pressure on the US dollar, is happening, and you can expect that if the Zimbabwe dollar is getting weaker and every day, and there's this uncertainty that happens, so people would prefer to store their assets, their values in US
like
dollars.
we're beginning to see people do in Nigeria. But it's even worse in Zimbabwe, where even a trader admitted not spending the Zimbabwean dollars for years. He's been trading and spending the US dollar. So that's a heavily dollarized economy. And that's part of the reason why the currency is depreciating in value against the US dollar. And you also understand that inflation rate in Zimbabwe is very high. In February, it was around 47.6%. It had jumped from 38% the previous month. So a lot of things have gone wrong with the Zimbabwean economy, which I believe that our guest today will do justice to it. And so we have joining us this morning virtually is someone you've seen before, is Ambassador Wallace. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, early morning to you from Trinidad in the Caribbean. I am in the Caribbean at the moment.
All right, let's talk about what's happening in Zimbabwe. Now, having reintroduced the Zimbabwean dollars in 2019, the country is thinking of launching gold-backed currency to replace the collapsing Zimbabwean dollar. What's your take on this?
It's the correct thing to do, and all of Africa has to look at standardizing a currency for the African continent. Why? All the other currencies, we spoke about this before, about fiat currency and pulling values out of the air. What is it backed by? We have on the African continent all the resources to back our own digital currency. And that is the way the African continent has to go. And Zimbabwe is taking a lead to say, look, we can back our currency. We don't have to dollarize our currency. No country in Africa has a right to dollarize their currency. They should all look towards having a central bank for Africa, backed by the reserves of the resources on the continent. That is the way forward. And thank Zimbabwe for it happening, because they're beginning to show. Remember that Gaddafi was already doing the very same thing. And it's one of the reasons why he was killed, because he was setting up a currency based on the reserves of oil in his country and heading for a central bank of Africa, and he was willing to fund it. Now, let the truth be told, now that we have the African Free Trade Area, it's the opportunity to start with a standard currency that is backed by the reserves of the continent. There's no other continent in the world that can back a currency like Africa can. Although we are talking about the Naira, we are talking about the Zimbabwe dollar, we have about 28 different currencies on the continent. All of them, we call they are pegged against a dollar. And that dollar, what is it backed by? What is actually backing the American dollar? It is not with any reserves. It is the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, which is not owned by the government of the United States. It's owned by the Rothschild, and it's owned by the Federal Reserve Bank. So they are lending the government of the United States money, propping up the dollar. And the reason why they made the dollar the currency of choice is because they linked it, and that was Kissinger, who linked the dollar to petrodollar, which was linked to the oil in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And that is how it became the value of exchange, and used it. Now, there is no need for the continent to use the dollar when they can create their own digital currency and a standard currency, and started off by using it for a contract. And as I'm saying, the contract is the African Free Trade Area. That is the standard digital currency that we should be using to enable trade, because everybody on the continent will have to use the dollar instead, and they have to wait till it goes to the SWIFT system, it goes to America, comes back, with choice. Someone stays in the United States at 25 or 30 years old and decides whether you can trade or not. And that is controlling your economy, that's controlling your destiny, and that's controlling the future of Africa. We have got to change and follow the lead of Zimbabwe. Everyone should get together now and say, with what's happening with Zimbabwe, is going to be affecting all of us. Of course, it's affecting Nigeria and the Naira. Of course, it's affecting the Kwacha. Of course, it's affecting the Cedi. Of course, it's affecting the Rand. All of these countries have resources that are so valuable that it can back any standard united digital currency.
All right, good to see you, Ambassador, once again.
Yeah,
if you look
good
at
morning.
Great. Now, if you look at the poor performance of the Zimbabwe dollar, the exchange rate 36,000 to the US dollar, that's at the black market. The official rate 26,000. Now, would you say that this new regime that is being proposed now will further rescue this Zimbabwe dollar from this chaotic kind of situation? And how do you see this playing out in a few months if using the gold reserves to substitute and to also strengthen the local currency? What might likely be the effect of this in a few months to come?
Well, in a few months to come, if Zimbabwe holds strong with what they decide, and that is to back it with their reserves, they would start to build back their local currency. But it should not be left in isolation. That's the point I'm trying to make now. It should not be left in isolation. Zimbabwe should now call on the African Union and call on other members of the African continent to say, let's start to build. Leave me alone, isolated, to fight this fall in a local currency, because it is going to continue if they do not have support. Because as you rightfully said, they are using their gold reserves, but they need to strengthen their means of exchange, their means. It is an IOU, over the counter. I am paying you for this, and I will pay you for that. Get, the African Union to get involved now of strengthening the currency of Zimbabwe, and asking all of the other members of the AU to join forces to strengthen their currency. So it is not to be left alone that Zimbabwe, yes, if you said they're using their gold reserves, and how far and how long will that be able to maintain their local currency? We don't know. But what we do know is if you move towards a standardizing a currency for the continent, and using Zimbabwe as an example, that they have put their reserves on the line, their resources on the line, what everyone should do as brothers on the continent is join Zimbabwe. So, well, this is the opportunity, because we are all suffering from the same thing. You've seen it happen in Nigeria, and it's been happening. We are fighting tooth and nail to dollarize our naira, But if we are united in purpose, and that is that we have the resources, and the AU starts to back the continent and say, hey, listen, let us put our reserves together, prop up Nigeria, prop up Zimbabwe, prop up the rest of the continent with our reserves, and form an African central bank. That is what we have to do, Femi. It cannot continue, because what's going to happen is that Zimbabwe is left isolated, and they will probably crash. As you're asking, how long will this last? They'll probably crash again in whether 6 months or a year, because they are going to be struggling with their reserves to strengthen their currency again against the dollar. We have to stop that now. We have to go towards a united currency for the continent. That's the only way out.
All right, talking about Zimbabwe now, launching a gold-backed currency. Now, the worry is sustenance. How do you think this can be sustained, being that, according to the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, the bank has just about a little over 1 ton of gold in its reserve and another 1.5 ton of gold offshore. So that comes to close to 3 tons of gold that Zimbabwe has. Is that sufficient enough if they're to maintain a gold-backed currency?
You have got exactly the point I'm making. How much gold does the rest of Africa has? How much oil does the rest of Africa has? How much diamond does the rest of Africa has? How much cobalt does the rest of Africa have? When we add the resources up, there is a value, isn't it? The mathematics, let somebody do the math and do the research. Is it not better that we now join hands with Zimbabwe? Because yes, their reserves are limited, but we have a number of resources which have value, not just gold. And that's the point I'm making. Let us add the resources of the continent and create a new currency. This is backed now by resources running into whatever exchange value you want to use, whether it's pounds, euros, dollars. Let's now have an equivalent currency backed by resources that can be quantified. Because if Zimbabwe only has 3 tons of gold, how long will that last to prop up their currency? They're left alone in isolation. The point I'm making is we now need to help Zimbabwe. We now need to help all of those other countries where, in effect, some of their currencies are valueless. It has no value. You can't exchange it anywhere on the continent to do any type of business or trade. we have to now think Pan-African. We now have to think resource value. We now have to think propping up each other's economy based on value of our resources, which we can peg our currency, a united currency, against.
According to reports, the Zimbabwean government have been largely criticized for printing money for spending. One would have expected that if there's a need to print money, it could have been for investment or something more economic. But this time around, money was being printed for, spending, and there's been this large criticism as regards lack of trust when it comes to the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, so that a lot of even citizens even prefer to keep their money at home. What do you make of this development, and how do you think this can be corrected in Zimbabwe?
Femi, let us do a parallel. The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States prints money and puts it through into the economy every time they have a crisis, don't they? They do, right? And it is based on what? And yet, the Americans and people who use their currency have confidence in it and have trust because they have, I would have to say, fooled the disarming public. Why should we say, because, Zimbabweans do not understand what is being done. Yes, they're printing money because they have a currency and they have to print, and there'll be no trust because it is the economic world order that is saying there should be no trust in your currency. It is a poisoned weapon. It's weaponized because you are saying if you don't use my dollar or you don't use my pound, you cannot trade and you cannot use it in your economy. The Zimbabweans are printing because they have to print because they have a currency that they need to use in their economy. But I'm going back to the same point that that should not be so because everybody else prints money and throws it into the economy. All of the central banks, wherever they are in the world, whether it's the pound, the euro, or the dollar, they print money. And they print money from their central bank to boost their economy. We have to have confidence in whatever currency we are using temporarily at the time, because I'm saying temporarily because the continent as a whole must go towards a standard united digital currency. It is confidence. So somebody has to do confidence building in Zimbabwe, educate the population on what it means to print their local currency and to use their local currency, which is backed by trust because it is backed by a resource that they have, which is gold. So it is education of the population and maybe do a simple, because the simple man in the street will, as you say, do mattress banking, need to understand what the country is doing. They are trying to battle against, a currency that has been pressurized to be standardized with dollarization. That's really the truth. It's a weapon. The dollar is a weapon, which is put on the pressure of, let's be real. People don't talk about this. All they're saying, well, this is the way that the population deem their own currency and they prefer to keep it under the mattress and prefer to trade in dollars. It's a pressure. It's a weapon. We are being weaponized. We are being weaponized by a currency when we should be having our own currency that we can have value in, confidence in, because it's all backed by real reserves. The dollar is not backed by any reserves. They print and they continue to print, throw it in the economy, and it's about confidence. A currency and a fiat currency is based on confidence. How do you build that confidence? We have to build trust in what we have as well.
All right. Now, as it is, Zimbabwe cannot build on the reserve because it's been cut off by a decade from multilateral support and even some other internal issues that it's been having, restricting access to foreign markets. And even currently, the U.S. had paused dialogue on some of the debt of Zimbabwe owing to the 2023 election. So there are some issues within Zimbabwe that the international community is not really fine with. Now, how do you think this will play in the long run on the Zimbabwean economy, and what can be done to regain goodwill with the international community?
Well, Zimbabwe has their own internal politics, but if you look at the history of Zimbabwe and what's happening, because of the stance they took with foreigners and their land and their reserves, Zimbabwe is being punished. I just said that they're being weaponized. The international community, IMF, World Bank, and others want to dictate to Zimbabwe how to run their economy. And if you do not, in any country, subscribe to the menu that they give you, they will internally interfere with your politics. They will crash your economy. I mean, have you heard or read the book, Economic Hitmen? Have you read the book, The Economic Hitmen? I'm asking a question. Are you hearing me? Can you hear me?
Okay. You asked if
Yeah?
I read the book, and I said no.
Right, okay, I didn't hear that. Right. So the Economic Hitmen, if you've read the book, tell you how when you do not subscribe to what the World Bank, IMF, and others want, they go in and they interfere with your economy, disable your economy, and ensure that you become a pariah state in the world economy. And therefore, you will be hearing, as you have just asked, how do they build back confidence with the international economies of the world? It is a weapon that is used to disable Zimbabwe because of the stance that they take. And if the politics of that country does not fit the international monetary system, they are going to break your economy. It's as simple as that. And they will sabotage it. And I will ask you to perhaps go and read that book, The Economic Hitmen, which will tell you a lot of the truths. And I'm telling it to the public now. You know, go and read The Economic Hitmen. They are real, and they do what they have to do to, as a matter of fact, to survive their own currency. So they are set out on Zimbabwe because Zimbabwe did not play by the rules. You know, Zimbabwe, from time immemorial, it has to go back with, you know, the land. It has to go back with the farmers moving out foreigners and giving back land to their people, etc. It is a long history, just like what they're doing with Haiti and many other countries around the world. You know, we talk about, and how they see Zimbabwe, etc. We have to look really at what is behind what is happening in Zimbabwe, what is happening in Haiti, what is happening in other countries who do not follow the international economic order, you know, and that really is what it is. We have to help Zimbabwe, and we have to change the narrative about Zimbabwe, because what we are doing is just following on what the narrative is and talking glibly about Zimbabwe and what is happening to them and the world economy and the international money order, etc. I am very vehement that we need to change this narrative, and we need to look inward in the continent to help our fellow brothers and their economies and standardize our currency. I keep saying it, and I keep saying it every time. We have to standardize our currency on the continent.
All right, let me do a follow-up to the point you raised earlier, which is the advocacy you made for the African Union to step in. But I want to know specifically, how can the African Union step into the situation you have in Zimbabwe if in the last 10 years they've introduced about 5 currencies? What do you think African Union can do in this situation to help? I want you to be very specific.
Okay. The African Union should now start to think about setting up an African central bank. That's their role. That is what the African Union is there to do. What did the European Union do? The European Union set up a European central bank and introduced, for trade first, the euro. And the euro became a currency now of exchange on the European continent, right? And that was the European Union. Using the same model, that is what the African Union specifically should do. Set up an African central bank, set up a currency, a standard currency for trade amongst the African Union members. Also, the African Union should take responsibility for signing contracts on behalf of the continent rather than every single African country or nation, I would like to say, being singled out by world powers and putting them into debt. There is no reason why every single country should be signing contracts with China, different contracts for different reasons. The African Union must take charge specifically for those things, because you now sign with the African Union, not signing with member countries and putting them at risk, at economic risk. That is what is happening. They are inheriting debt, they are creating debt because they are singled out. It's like a pack, an animal pack. You single out the weakest ones, and you go after them, and you kill them off. And that's what's happening on the continent, Femi. That is what is happening. The African Union needs to take charge and take responsibility. Now that they are having a change on the African Union, elections are coming up for a new chairman. And we are absolutely asking that the quicker they get an African Union leader who sees and focuses on Pan-African issues, the better. Because the African Union has been moribund, as far as I'm concerned, for the past 10, 15, 20 years. They have not been focusing on the issues and taking responsibility for what they were created for, like the European Union. The European Union was created when the lira, when the drachma, when the pounds in Greece and other places were weak. It was useless. Remember, at one point in time, Italy's currency was nothing. The Greek currency was nothing. It was useless. Just like the Zimbabwean dollar, the naira, etc. All the other European countries had a problem. They got together, the European Union took responsibility, took charge, European Central Bank, and then they introduced the euro. Femi, it's there. It's not rocket science. It's there. We just use the same model. So the African Union specifically should just copy what the European Union did. Simple.
Will it be an easy copy, looking at the peculiarity of the African continent? Now, when you talk about the African continent, what is the Union even done for the countries in it? I'm talking about the African Union. What has the Union done for countries in it? Now, in relation to what you talked about, the African Union signing contracts on behalf of countries with other countries, would that be possible? Would that unity be there? And do you think it will make any difference? Because the singular leaders that individually or as country heads sign agreements between their countries and other countries come together. What difference do you think that will make?
The difference is exactly what you have just said. The unity of purpose. The unity of purpose is the African Union saying, right, we call it Ubuntu. We are now going to take charge and be responsible as a union, to shield our member states from incurring large debts by signing contracts. And yes, the model of the European Union can be copied exactly, because that is one of the first steps. One of the first steps, for example, right now, that the African Union can take is say, right, we have the African Free Trade Area. Thank God it has only been 2 years old. So there's time with a new leadership of the African Union to now say, okay, one of our key issues now is centralizing and standardizing trade in the African Free Trade Area. And to do that, we are going to introduce a standard United Digital African Currency Contract. SUDA.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard you when you said there's a need to copy the EU template. But if that is going to be done as far as AU is concerned, don't you think the starting point should be having a common currency? And over the years, this has been challenging. There's been several advocacies, several conversations in this regard. Even you and your team, you're also coming up with what you call SUDAC. And don't you think it is high time we've had this kind of common currency, which will be a way to create a sense of oneness and purpose in Africa, just like what is playing out in EU?
Yeah, absolutely correct, Femi. You're absolutely correct. And because I'm passionate about this, I have put a team together to work on it. So I just don't talk the talk, I walk the talk. So we are walking the talk because the gap is there. We've seen the need. And one of the things we're looking at is quickly the change that's going to take place during the next few months, because they are on the process now of changing the AU chairmanship of the Commission, is to approach the AU now and put to them our solution for standardizing and uniting the continent with a standard currency for trade. And you are absolutely correct. It is now down to the leadership of the AU, because the AU is driving the ACFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and therefore they are the vehicle that can drive what we are just talking about, just like the EU did. So yes, my answer to you, Femi, is absolutely yes. It is about uniting the currency for trade. Use the trade African Free Trade Area as the starting point. And there's no better starting point than the African Union, because this is their baby. This is in their remit. You know, the African Free Trade Area is in their remit. And everything starts with trade. As I said, what happened with Euro, it was because of trade. The Italians and the Spanish pesos and the drachma, they all couldn't trade because they had different currencies and different values. And it was like it was madness. I remember when, those currencies were useless. I remember traveling through Europe, and, you just couldn't exchange at that point in time. And then they came up with their template of uniting, and the European Union backing, solidifying, and protecting their people in Europe so that they can start to trade with one common currency. And that is the answer now for the African continent. We start trading with one common currency. And thank God that we are definitely looking into it and have a team that has prepared and are ready to work with the African Union on this.
Would you mind explaining the workability of the SUDAC currency? It's digital currency, right? Do you worry about limitations operating within the African continent being a digital currency?
Digital currency, as I said before, we are talking about education. You have to educate the population, and you have to give them confidence. It's transaction-based, it's open, it's traceable, it is trackable. So, and because it's digital, you are assured and you know that your currency has confidence and can be utilized, especially if it's adopted by a body like the African Union, and you are educated that this is now yours. This is what you can use to trade, and it will have its own value. It is about education. We now have on the continent, 70% of the continent are youths. They are all digitally savvy. I mean, if you are in Kenya, for example, you're already using the M-Pesa. When I'm in Kenya, I am using M-Pesa to do all my transactions with confidence. Absolutely. I hardly carry the Kenyan shilling. The M-Pesa, I mean, it is absolutely the way to go. And we have examples of it already. We have mobile money. We have digital transactions. Don't we have confidence in those already? We already start having that because it is the youth of the continent who are digitally minded. Let's say our older folks still want to keep money in their mattress. And that is the older folks because they have confidence in, that hard piece of paper that they're using. But at the moment, I pay for everything when I'm in Kenya with my M-Pesa. I have an M-Pesa account and I do all my transactions. Is it the cab? Is it the grocery? Is it for anything? Even right down to the man in the street who's selling corn. He just says, "This is my number." And I flip my M-Pesa and I pay them, in the least in the least amount of the digital shilling that they have there. So digital economy is now aware, is now part and parcel of transactions on the continent because it's the youth who are digitally savvy. I must say that, it is my children who taught me to use, digital transactions. And it is so easy once you're educated. So if I can be educated, and I see the man in the street selling coconuts, selling corn, using M-Pesa, even the beggars, I'm not joking. I go to the grocery and I meet beggars outside with their children. And they said, "This is my number. You can send whatever you want to me by M-Pesa to my account." And, I was amazed that, they're not even accepting paper money. Just send it to me by M-Pesa, you know. So it's about education, my dear. It's about education, and it's about utilizing the power of the digital youth to introduce, which will be easy, I believe, on the continent because of the large percentage of digitally savvy youth that we have, which is 70 to 80% of the continent, to drive this and to drive this process. So it can happen, and the confidence is there already. The confidence is built by digital transactions right now in different states of the continent.
All right, now let's shift our attention to what is happening in Egypt, talking about the proposed African Energy Bank. You're aware that Egypt has pulled out in a bid to not to be part of this initiative. Now, the essence of this project is to fund oil and gas related projects across Africa. Now, for our viewers to understand, we'd like you to give us a background to this proposed African Energy Bank. And don't you think that now that Egypt has pulled out, that will be another setback to the takeoff of this initiative?
Why? Why don't we shift, for example, to Nigeria, for example, the largest, oil and gas reserves on the continent, followed by Angola, followed by Equatorial Guinea, followed by Ghana, the other oil and gas producing nations. Okay, so Egypt has pulled out. Do the rounds. It's just like making a king in Nigeria. You have houses of monarchies, and who is the ruling stool gets the kingship. So I think it's an opportunity for Nigeria, for example, or Angola to take lead. Because the oil and gas projects, right now, as you know, Uganda is building a refinery. Nigeria has just built a private refinery at Dangote. NNPC has said that they're bringing the other refinery.
Do you see the reason Egypt is given for withdrawing from hosting the African Energy Bank as wanting to give other African nations a chance to do so as a genuine reason? Could there be other reasons such as funds why Egypt is backing out?
Funds, you said? Sorry, I didn't
All
hear
right,
that.
Egypt withdrawing its bid to host the Africa Energy Bank, citing the reason that it wants to give other African nations the opportunity to do so. Do you see that as a genuine reason? Could there be other reasons, maybe issues concerning funds, as why they are withdrawing from the bid?
It could be several reasons. It could also be pressure from the West. It could be pressure, from internal politics. I mean, we can't quite see the nuances, but yes, it could be any number of things, and the contributing countries to put in their funds. So what I'm saying is somebody should take charge, and if it is a matter of funds, still rally among the oil and gas producing countries to put the desired funds together, add the projects that needs to be done, map out who gets what, it is your turn to build this, and as part of your prioritization for oil and gas, Uganda is building, a major refinery, Tanzania, if all the countries can put their funds together and the confidence is there, the bank can take off. And, that's why I'm saying, for whatever reason, Egypt has decided to pull out. I don't see them as being the key factor to stop an African energy bank taking off. If it's funds, then everybody should be disciplined enough to ensure that whatever they have to peg or promise, put it in and start. And that's why I say another country can now take the lead and ensure that if the problem was funds, they take the lead and marshal everyone else. I'm sure at that point in time, if it was funds, then Egypt will come back in. But what I'm saying is that should not derail having an African energy bank when we have so many oil and gas producing countries which have the funds, which have surplus funds, that are put into sovereign states. When I say sovereign state, into a sovereign vehicle, and that can be used as part of, the pledge for the bank and for the projects that they want to complete. It's a brilliant idea to have an African energy bank to drive the continent's economy.
Funds for this kind of initiative, you have Nigeria contributing about $10 million, followed by Angola, and then Ghana is also making commitment with about $20 million. But what do you make of the proposed initial capital base of $5 billion for this initiative? Do you think that will be enough? And then what do you think, what kind of mechanism should be put in place to ensure there's transparency and also accountability when it comes to the disbursement of this fund so that the purpose intended for this kind of initiative can be achieved?
Yeah, good question. Well, as I was just saying, it has to do with unity of purpose, prioritization. We already have people who are experienced in banking. If each member state has a committee with their individual banking experts on that board, for example, and on that committee with banking experience and following the principles and practices of banking, that should be one of the things that are put into place. Two, as I just said, look at the projects table for these projects, prioritize them, give clarity and clear transactions for that, and apply it, implement it. Therefore, everybody sees and knows who is next on which project and which timeline. The money that is required should be totaled at this point in time, saying, okay, Angola, we are going to build a pipeline from here to Mozambique, or Nigeria, we are going to build a pipeline and connect, Niger and Mali, whatever. What will that cost? And of course, those things are very transparent. You know the cost of that, you know the timetable for that, you have the correct tendering process, you have the people with the expertise and the experience to do what you are requiring done, and you know the clear value and timelines. It's still banking. And therefore, if together the committee gets together and say, okay, we are mapping the next 5 years, what do we need to do? Okay, Nigeria needs to build 9 modular refineries in 9 states in Nigeria. We want to put one out every 6 months, which is easy to do because it's modular, right? And it will cost this amount of money. And Nigeria, okay, we will fund, your modular refineries, over 3 years or 5 years. And you already have the cost of that, the timetable for that. It's there, it's clear, right? Tanzania, you need to build a pipeline all the way to Kenya. This is the cost, this is the timetable. And you prioritize, as an energy bank, you prioritize which projects you are going to fund. What is the timetable for that? It's simple, clear banking. And what is the collateral? They have the collateral as members of the energy bank, and they also have the collateral of their particular project, because that has value. So I don't see it as a problem of transparency, and I don't see it as a problem of banking confidence. I see it as a way forward to utilize the resources, which is a good idea, that the oil and gas producing countries have to help each other to grow their projects. It is clear.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Williams Wallace, for your time. But quickly before you go, what do you think will be the benefits to whichever country that eventually hosts this energy bank? And what would that mean for the future of oil and gas in Africa as the West shifts away from fossil fuel?
Right. Well, the West are saying they will shift away from fossil fuel, but that's not going to happen for a long while to come still. However, what it means for any country that hosts the bank is that they become the darling of the oil and gas countries in Africa, because they will be hosting, they will be promoting unity in their sector. And they will be the ones who will be attracting, all of their fellow oil and gas producers to their country and to their projects. They, in a sense, will probably have some priority say in projects, including their own. So if it's in Nigeria, for example, I will see Nigeria ensuring that, their projects are on the forefront of the oil and gas projects. Not to the detriment of others, but the fact that it's there, you find all the oil and gas producers will be coming to Nigeria, for example. They will be the ones bringing project ideas to the country and to the energy bank. They'll be the ones who will be depending on the oil and gas experts in that country to discuss. And so they become the reference point. Whoever and wherever the energy bank is, will become the reference point for oil and gas projects on the continent. So whoever takes the lead now and whoever is the resident country for the energy bank has many benefits, many benefits. Oil and gas experts, banking experts, project experts, and they will probably be the ones who will also benefit to participate in the projects.
Right. What a way to wrap up this conversation. We'd like to appreciate you for your time. I learned it's 3 a.m. or thereabouts, wherever you're joining us, and for you to have, stayed awake this time around to join us for this kind of conversation, it shows a level of commitment on your part. So we want to thank you for your submission, your intervention as regards issues related to Zimbabwe, Egypt, and by extension, African continent. Thank you for your time, Ambassador. Really appreciate it.
Well, I'm in Trinidad and Tobago, which is an oil and gas country as well. And just to let you know, the Trinidad model on gas, I brought it to Nigeria. So it's a country that you need to look at and what they have done over time with oil and gas. I'm here actually because of the oil spill in Tobago, and I'm looking into that. I am committed to supporting your program and in areas that are very passionate for me, the energy bank and oil and gas, and also the currency for Africa as a Pan-Africanist. So thank you very much for having me, and I can go back to sleep now.
That's great. Kudos for the good work and keep up the commitment to the African project. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, sir.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.